The dust from the stranger's boots settled on the floorboards of the mercantile as Rosalie Durant looked up from her ledger, and something in her chest tightened at the sight of the tall, lean cowboy standing in the doorway with nothing but the clothes on his back and a battered hat in his hands. He had the look of a man who had been riding for days, maybe weeks, with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of storm clouds over the prairie. His shirt was faded from too many washings in river water, his boots worn down at the heels, and his denims patched at the knees. Everything about him screamed saddle tramp, one of those drifters who moved from ranch to ranch, working for wages barely enough to keep themselves fed. Rosalie had seen plenty of his type since her father died 6 months ago and left her this mercantile in Ardmore, Oklahoma. It was 1883, and the town was growing with the expansion of the railroad, bringing all manner of men looking for work or fortune. Most of them passed through without a second glance. This one, though, had stopped in her doorway and was looking at her with an intensity that made her hands still on the page. "Can I help you?" she asked, keeping her voice level and professional. At 23, she had learned to be wary of strangers, especially the kind who looked like they did not have 2 coins to rub together. "Yes, madam," he said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to come from deep in his chest. "I am looking to buy some supplies. Flour, salt, coffee, and whatever fresh vegetables you might have." She set down her pen and stood, smoothing her hands over her apron. "I can help you with that. Do you have credit established anywhere in town?" A flicker of something crossed his face, amusement maybe, or annoyance. "No, madam." "I will be paying cash." Rosalie nodded and moved to gather the items he requested. As she worked, she could feel his eyes on her, watching her movements with that same quiet intensity. It made her self-conscious in a way she had not felt in a long time, aware of the wisps of dark hair that had escaped her bun, the worn fabric of her dress that she had mended 3 times already. "You are Rosalie Durant?" he asked after a moment. She turned to face him, surprised. "I am." "Have we met?" "No, madam, but I have heard your name mentioned in town. People speak highly of you and your father's business." "My father is dead," she said bluntly, returning to measuring out flour into a cloth sack. "Has been for half a year now. I am sorry for your loss." There was genuine sympathy in his voice, and it caught her off guard. Most people in town had offered their condolences and then immediately started speculating about whether she could keep the business running on her own. This stranger sounded like he actually meant it. "Thank you," she said quietly. "That will be $2.40. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a leather wallet, extracting the exact amount in coins and bills. His hands were scarred and calloused, the hands of a man who worked hard for his living. When he passed her the money, their fingers brushed, and she felt a jolt like static electricity. "I am Vincent O'Malley," he said, meeting her eyes. "I will be around Ardmore for a while, so I expect we will see each other again." "Perhaps," Rosalie said, wrapping his purchases and handing them over. She did not want to seem too interested, even though something about Vincent O'Malley made her want to ask questions, to know where he had come from and what had brought him to this dusty corner of Oklahoma. He tipped his hat to her and left, and Rosalie found herself going to the window to watch him walk down the street. He moved with an easy confidence, despite his worn appearance, and she noticed several other women turning to look at him as he passed. She shook her head and returned to her ledger, annoyed with herself for paying so much attention to a drifter who would probably be gone within the week. But Vincent O'Malley did not leave within the week. Rosalie saw him around town regularly over the next several days, always polite when they crossed paths, always tipping his hat in greeting. She learned from the gossip that circulated through Ardmore that he had taken a room at the boarding house, and was doing odd jobs around town, fixing fences and mucking out stables for whatever wages he could get. "That cowboy has been asking about you," her friend Margaret told her one afternoon when she stopped by the mercantile. Margaret worked at the hotel and heard everything that happened in Ardmore. "What kind of asking?" Rosalie said, trying to keep her tone casual. "Oh, just general things. Whether you were married, whether you had family in town. Mrs. Henderson told him you were an orphan now and running this place all on your own." Rosalie felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I wish people would not discuss my personal business with strangers." "He does not seem like a bad sort," Margaret said, leaning against the counter. "Quiet, keeps to himself mostly, but he works hard from what I have seen. Tom Patterson hired him to repair his barn, and Vincent had it done in half the time Tom expected." "Good for him," Rosalie said, but her heart was beating faster than it should have been. That evening, as she was closing up the mercantile, Vincent appeared at her door again. The sun was setting behind him, casting his face in shadow and making him look even taller than he actually was. "Miss Durant," he said, "I was wondering if I might walk you home. It is getting dark and a woman should not be walking alone." "I walk home alone every night," she said, locking the door behind her. "I am perfectly capable of taking care of myself." "I do not doubt that," he said, falling into step beside her anyway. "But it would make me feel better to see you safely to your door." She should have told him no, should have insisted on her independence. But the truth was, she was tired of being alone all the time, tired of carrying the weight of the business and her grief by herself. So she nodded and let him walk beside her through the dusty streets of Ardmore. "How long have you been in town?" she asked, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled between them. "About 2 weeks now," he said. "I like it here. Good people, good land. Where are you from originally?" "Missouri, mostly. But I have been moving around for a few years now, seeing the country." "Sounds lonely," she said before she could stop herself. He glanced at her, and in the fading light she could see something vulnerable in his expression. "It can be, but sometimes a man needs to be on his own for a while to figure things out." They reached her small house behind the mercantile, and she turned to face him on the porch. "Thank you for walking me home, Mr. O'Malley." "Vincent," he said. "Please call me Vincent." "Vincent, then, and you can call me Rosalie." He smiled, and it transformed his whole face, making him look younger and less careworn. "Good night, Rosalie." "Good night." She watched him walk away into the gathering darkness, and something in her chest ached with a loneliness she had been trying to ignore for months. Over the following weeks, Vincent became a regular presence in Rosalie's life. He found work at various ranches around Ardmore, always returning to town in the evenings. He would stop by the mercantile to buy supplies, and their conversations grew longer each time. She learned that he was 26, that he had left home after his mother died and his father remarried, that he loved the freedom of the open range but was starting to think about settling down somewhere. She told him about her father, about how he had built this business from nothing and taught her everything he knew. She told him about the struggle to keep it running now that he was gone, the creditors who thought a woman could not possibly manage on her own, the constant worry that she would lose everything her father had worked for. "You are doing fine," Vincent told her one evening as they sat on her porch, watching the stars come out. "Anyone can see you know what you are doing." "Some people do not want to see it," she said bitterly. "Thomas Bradford at the bank has been pressuring me to sell. He says a woman has no business running a mercantile on her own." Vincent's jaw tightened. "Thomas Bradford is a fool. You have built this business up since your father died. The inventory is better organized, the prices are fairer, and you have brought in new customers." "I have heard people talking about it." Rosalie felt warmth spread through her chest at his words. "Thank you for noticing." "I notice everything about you," he said quietly, and when she met his eyes, the intensity there took her breath away. They sat in silence for a long moment, the air between them charged with possibility. Then Vincent stood as if he had to force himself to move. "I should let you get some rest. Good night, Rosalie." "Good night, Vincent." But she did not rest well that night, her mind full of thoughts about the mysterious cowboy who seemed to genuinely care about her welfare. She kept telling herself not to get attached, that he was just passing through like all the others. But her heart was not listening to reason anymore. The next day was Saturday, and Ardmore was busy with ranchers and their families coming in from the surrounding area to do their weekly shopping. Rosalie was run off her feet from dawn until late afternoon, barely having time to catch her breath between customers. She was in the back room, restocking shelves, when she heard raised voices in the front of the store. She hurried out to find Thomas Bradford, the banker, standing at her counter with two other men she did not recognize. "As I was saying, Miss Durant," Bradford was saying in his pompous way, "these gentlemen are interested in purchasing your property. They are willing to offer a fair price." "I have told you repeatedly, Mr. Bradford, that I am not interested in selling," Rosalie said, keeping her voice steady despite her anger. Now, let us be reasonable," Bradford said, his tone patronizing. "A woman in your position cannot afford to turn down a good offer." "You have debts to consider." "My debts are current," Rosalie said sharply, "and my business is none of your concern." One of the other men stepped forward, a heavy-set man with cold eyes. "Miss Durant, we are prepared to be generous, but we will have this property one way or another." The threat in his voice was unmistakable, and Rosalie felt fear spike through her. But before she could respond, the door of the mercantile opened and Vincent walked in. He took in the scene with one quick glance, and his whole demeanor changed. The easygoing cowboy disappeared, replaced by something harder and more dangerous. "Is there a problem here, Rosalie?" he asked, his voice deceptively mild. "These men were just leaving," Rosalie said, grateful for his presence even though she knew he could not really help her. What could a broke saddle tramp do against a banker and his associates? "Now see here," Bradford began, but Vincent cut him off. "I believe the lady said you were leaving." The heavy-set man sneered. "And who are you? Some drifter looking for handouts. This is none of your business." "Anything concerning Rosalie is my business," Vincent said, and there was steel in his voice now. The two men exchanged glances, and for a moment Rosalie thought there might be violence. But then Bradford laughed, a brittle, unpleasant sound. "Very well. But this is not over, Miss Durant. You would do well to reconsider our offer." They left, and Rosalie sagged against the counter, her legs suddenly weak. Vincent was at her side immediately, his hand steadying her elbow. "Are you all right?" "Yes," she said, then admitted, "No, Vincent, they scared me. That man threatened me." His face darkened. "Did Bradford put them up to this?" "I do not know. He has been after me to sell for months, but he has never brought men like that before." Vincent was quiet for a moment, his hand still on her arm. Then he said, "Rosalie, I need to tell you something. Can we go somewhere private?" She nodded and led him to the back room, her mind racing with possibilities. Was he going to tell her he was leaving? That he could not be involved in her problems? But what he said instead shocked her to her core. "I am not what you think I am," Vincent began, running a hand through his dark hair. "I mean, I am a cowboy, that part is true, but I am not broke and I am not just drifting." Rosalie stared at him, not understanding. "What do you mean?" He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded document, worn from being carried but still intact. "I own land, Rosalie. 3,000 acres about 10 miles north of here. Good grazing land, water rights, everything a man would need to run a successful ranch. She took the deed from him with shaking hands, reading the words that confirmed what he was saying. 3,000 acres in the name of Vincent Michael O'Malley. I do not understand, she whispered. Why did you let everyone think you were just a drifter? Because I needed to know what this town was really like, he said. I needed to know if people would treat me differently if they thought I was nobody, and I needed to know if you would see me for who I am, not for what I own. Rosalie looked up at him, emotions warring inside her. You lied to me. I never lied, he said urgently. I just did not tell you everything. Rosalie, I came to Ardmore because I heard it was a good town, a place where a man could build something lasting. I have been working on the land, getting it ready, planning to build a house and start a real cattle operation. But then I met you and everything changed. How did it change? She asked, her voice barely audible. Vincent stepped closer, his eyes searching hers. I fell in love with you. With your strength, your determination, the way you care about your father's legacy, the way you never gave up even when things were hard. I love you, Rosalie Durant, and I want you to know that if those men come back, they will have to go through me. And they will find that I am not so easy to push around when I have resources behind me. Rosalie's mind was reeling. Vincent O'Malley owned 3,000 acres. He was not a poor drifter but a landowner, someone with means and standing. And he said he loved her. You love me. She repeated, needing to hear it again. With everything I am, he said simply. I know I should have told you about the land sooner, but I was afraid that if you knew, you might think I was just another man trying to take advantage of you, trying to get control of your business. I wanted you to know me first, to trust me. She should have been angry with him for the deception. But looking into his eyes, seeing the vulnerability there, she could not find it in herself to be upset. Because the truth was, she had fallen in love with him too, with the man he had shown himself to be through his actions, not his possessions. I do trust you, she said softly. And Vincent, I love you too. The smile that broke across his face was like the sun coming out from behind clouds. He reached for her and she went into his arms willingly, feeling safe for the first time in months. When he kissed her, it was gentle and reverent, a promise of all the things they could build together. When they finally pulled apart, Rosalie was breathless and smiling. So you own a ranch? I do. It is rough right now, just land and possibility. But I have plans, Rosalie, big plans. I want to build something that will last, something we can pass on to our children someday. Our children, she teased, her heart soaring at the implication. If you will have me, he said seriously. I know we have not known each other long, but out here, people do not have the luxury of long courtships. I know what I want, and what I want is a life with you. Will you marry me, Rosalie? She should have asked for time to think about it. She should have been practical and cautious. But her heart had already made the decision. Yes, she said. Yes, I will marry you. They spent the rest of the afternoon making plans, talking about the future with an excitement that neither of them had felt in years. Vincent told her about the ranch, about the house he wanted to build, and the herd he planned to raise. Rosalie told him about her dreams for the mercantile, about expanding the inventory and maybe even opening a second location someday. You would not have to work if you did not want to, Vincent said. I can provide for us. I know, Rosalie said, but I want to keep the mercantile. It was my father's legacy and it matters to me. Can you understand that, of course, he said, squeezing her hand. We will make it work. Maybe we can find someone to manage it for you some days, so you can spend time at the ranch too. It was so easy, talking with him about the future. Everything seemed possible when they were together, but their happiness was short-lived. The next morning, Rosalie arrived at the mercantile to find the front window smashed and merchandise scattered everywhere. Someone had broken in during the night and vandalized the place, destroying inventory and fouling what they could not carry away. She stood in the doorway, tears streaming down her face as she looked at the destruction. Everything her father had built, everything she had worked so hard to maintain, damaged and ruined. Vincent found her there an hour later, still standing amid the wreckage. He did not say anything, just pulled her into his arms and let her cry against his chest. "They did this," she said brokenly. "Bradford and those men, they are trying to force me to sell. We will rebuild," Vincent said firmly, "and I am going to have a talk with Mr. Bradford." "No," Rosalie said, pulling back to look at him. "I do not want you getting into trouble because of me." "I am not going to start a fight," Vincent assured her, "but he needs to know that you are not alone anymore, that if he wants to threaten you, he will have to deal with me." Together, they spent the day cleaning up the mess and salvaging what they could. Several townspeople stopped by to help when they heard what had happened, including Margaret and Tom Patterson, the man whose barn Vincent had repaired. By evening, the mercantile was clean again, though many of the shelves stood empty. "It is going to take everything I have to restock," Rosalie said wearily as they locked up for the night. "Let me help," Vincent said. "I have money set aside for the ranch, but we can use some of it for this." "No," Rosalie said firmly. "I appreciate the offer, but I need to do this myself. I need to prove I can keep this business running." Vincent looked like he wanted to argue, but he nodded. "I understand, but at least let me help in other ways. I can make repairs, upgrade things. And I can make sure no one bothers you again." True to his word, Vincent spent the next several days at the mercantile, fixing the broken window and reinforcing the doors. He also visited Thomas Bradford at the bank, and while Rosalie did not know what was said between them, the banker kept his distance after that. Slowly, Rosalie rebuilt her inventory, using the credit she had established with suppliers and the savings she had carefully put aside. It was hard work, and there were days when she wondered if she should just give up and sell like Bradford wanted. But Vincent was always there, encouraging her, believing in her, and that made all the difference. A month after the break-in, Rosalie received an unexpected visitor. A well-dressed woman in her 40s arrived at the mercantile, looking around with obvious interest. "You must be Miss Durant," the woman said, extending her hand. "I am Catherine Morrison. My husband and I own a ranch about 20 miles south of here. Pleased to meet you, Mrs. Morrison," Rosalie said, shaking her hand. "What can I help you with today? Actually, I am here because I have heard wonderful things about your business," Catherine said. "Several of my friends have mentioned that you carry items they cannot find anywhere else, and that your prices are very fair. I was hoping we might establish a regular account." Rosalie felt hope bloom in her chest. The Morrison Ranch was one of the largest in the area, and having them as regular customers would be a significant boost to her business. "I would be delighted to work with you," she said. Over the next hour, Catherine placed a large order and they discussed terms for future deliveries. When she left, Rosalie could hardly contain her excitement. This was exactly the kind of account she needed to secure the mercantile's future. That evening, she shared the good news with Vincent over dinner at the boarding house. They had fallen into a routine of eating together most evenings, and Rosalie treasured these quiet moments when they could talk about their days and make plans for the future. "That is wonderful," Vincent said, his face lighting up with genuine pleasure. "I told you that you could make this work." "I could not have done it without your help," Rosalie admitted. "Vincent, about your offer to help financially. I have been thinking, and I wonder if instead of a loan we could make it an investment." He raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "I mean, when we get married, we will be partners in everything. The mercantile, the ranch, all of it. So instead of you lending me money, what if we become business partners now? You invest in the mercantile and I will help you build the ranch." Vincent was quiet for a moment, considering. Then he smiled. "I like that idea, partners in everything." They shook hands across the table, sealing their agreement, and then Vincent raised her hand to his lips and kissed it, making her heart flutter. "Have you thought about when you want to get married?" he asked. "Soon," Rosalie said. "I do not see any reason to wait, do you?" "Not a single one," Vincent agreed. They decided on a date 3 weeks away, which gave them just enough time to make arrangements. Ardmore did not have a church yet, but the circuit preacher would be coming through and they could be married then. Rosalie would wear her mother's wedding dress, which she had kept carefully preserved, and they would have a simple reception at the hotel. As word spread through town about their engagement, Rosalie was surprised by the outpouring of support. People she barely knew stopped by to congratulate her and wish them well. Even some of those who had been skeptical about her running the mercantile seemed to warm to her now that she was marrying a landowner. "They treat me differently now that they know about the ranch," Vincent observed one evening. "Does that bother you?" Rosalie asked. "A little," he admitted. "But I understand it. In a place like this, land means stability, means you are putting down roots. People respect that." "I would have loved you either way," Rosalie said softly. "Rich or poor, it would not have mattered to me." "I know," Vincent said, pulling her close. "That is why I love you." The week before the wedding, Vincent took Rosalie out to see the ranch for the first time. They rode on horseback, and as they crested a hill and the land spread out before them, Rosalie caught her breath at the beauty of it. Rolling grassland stretched as far as she could see, dotted with stands of trees and crossed by a clear running creek. In the distance, she could see the beginning of a structure, the frame of what would become their house. "What do you think?" Vincent asked, watching her face anxiously. "It is beautiful," she said honestly. "Vincent, it is perfect." They dismounted and he walked her through his plans, showing her where the house would stand, where he wanted to build the barn and corrals, where the best grazing was. His enthusiasm was infectious, and Rosalie found herself caught up in the vision, seeing not just what was there now, but what it could become. "We could have a vegetable garden here," she said, pointing to a spot near where the house would be. "And maybe some chickens." "Whatever you want," Vincent said. "This is your home too, Rosalie. I want you to make it yours." They spent the afternoon exploring the property, and by the time they headed back to town, Rosalie felt like she had truly begun to understand the life they would build together. It would not be easy, she knew. Running both a mercantile and a ranch would take all their energy and determination, but they would do it together, and that made all the difference. The day of the wedding dawned clear and bright, one of those perfect Oklahoma days when the sky seemed to go on forever. Rosalie dressed in her mother's gown with Margaret's help, her hands shaking slightly as she fastened the tiny buttons. "You look beautiful," Margaret said, tears in her eyes. "Your parents would be so proud of you." Rosalie touched the locket she wore, which held small portraits of her mother and father. "I hope so." The ceremony was held in the town square, with what seemed like half of Ardmore in attendance. Vincent stood waiting for her in his best suit, his hair neatly combed, looking so handsome that Rosalie felt her breath catch. When he saw her, his whole face lit up with such love and joy that she had to blink back tears. The circuit preacher performed the ceremony, and Rosalie hardly heard the words, so focused was she on Vincent's face, on the feeling of his hands holding hers. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Vincent kissed her sweetly, and the crowd erupted in cheers. The reception at the hotel was a joyful affair, with food and dancing and well wishes from everyone in town. Even Thomas Bradford made an appearance, though he left early and did not speak directly to Rosalie or Vincent. She did not care. Nothing could dampen her happiness on this day. As evening fell and the party began to wind down, Vincent leaned close and whispered, "Ready to go home, Mrs. O'Malley." The name sent a thrill through her. Mrs. O'Malley. She was Vincent's wife now, starting a new chapter of her life. "Yes," she said, "let us go home." They had decided to spend their wedding night at the ranch, even though the house was not finished yet. Vincent had set up a tent with a real bed and had prepared everything to make it comfortable. As they rode out under the stars, Rosalie felt a sense of peace and rightness settle over her. The tent was indeed comfortable, and Vincent had thought of everything, from clean linens to lanterns that cast a warm glow. He was gentle with her, patient and loving, and if Rosalie had any remaining doubts about their future together, they were swept away in the tenderness of their wedding night. Afterward, as they lay together in the darkness, listening to the sounds of the prairie, Vincent said, "I promise you, Rosalie, I am going to spend every day making sure you never regret choosing me." "I could never regret this," she said, resting her head on his chest. "You are everything I never knew I needed." They spent the next few days at the ranch, working side by side to continue building their future. Vincent showed Rosalie how to ride the property lines, how to check the water sources, how to spot signs of cattle or predators. She proved to be a quick learner, and he praised her natural abilities. "You are a true ranch wife," he said proudly, and Rosalie felt a surge of satisfaction. She was not just the mercantile owner anymore. She was a partner in a growing enterprise, building something lasting with the man she loved. When they returned to town, they settled into a new routine. Rosalie continued to run the mercantile, with Vincent's investment allowing her to expand her inventory and hire a part-time assistant. This gave her the freedom to spend several days a week at the ranch, where she threw herself into making it a true home. Vincent hired a crew of workers to finish the house, and Rosalie was intimately involved in every decision, from the placement of windows to the color of paint for the walls. She wanted it to be perfect, a place where they could build their life together and someday raise their children. The house took shape over the summer months of 1883, a sturdy two-story structure with a wide porch and large windows that let in the prairie light. Rosalie planted gardens and worked with Vincent to establish a small herd of cattle. It was hard work, but satisfying in a way she had never experienced before. By fall, they were able to move into the house permanently, though they kept the apartment above the mercantile for nights when they needed to stay in town. The house was not completely finished yet, but it had walls and a roof and a bed, and that was enough. Their first night in the new house, Vincent carried Rosalie over the threshold, making her laugh with delight. They christened every room, celebrating the culmination of months of hard work and planning. "This is really ours," Rosalie said wonderingly, standing in the kitchen and looking around at the space she had helped design. "All ours," Vincent confirmed. "And it is just the beginning, Rosalie. We are going to build something amazing here." He was right. Over the next year, the O'Malley ranch flourished. Vincent proved to be an excellent cattleman with a good eye for breeding stock and a talent for negotiation. The herd grew steadily, and they were able to hire 2 full-time ranch hands to help with the work. The mercantile also continued to thrive under Rosalie's management. With her assistant handling the day-to-day operations, she was able to focus on the bigger picture, establishing relationships with suppliers and expanding into new product lines. The account with the Morrison Ranch led to several other large accounts, and soon Rosalie was making deliveries to ranches all over the county. In the spring of 1884, Rosalie discovered she was pregnant. She told Vincent on a beautiful April morning as they sat on the porch of their house, watching the sunrise over their land. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice choked with emotion. "As sure as I can be," she said, smiling through her own tears. "We are going to have a baby, Vincent." He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "Thank you," he whispered against her hair. "Thank you for this, for everything." The pregnancy was not easy. Rosalie suffered from terrible morning sickness for the first few months, and the summer heat made her uncomfortable and tired. But Vincent was attentive and caring, making sure she rested and ate well, taking over more of the ranch work so she would not overextend herself. As her belly grew, they prepared a nursery in one of the upstairs bedrooms, painting it a cheerful yellow and building a cradle from oak wood. Rosalie sewed curtains and baby clothes, her heart full of anticipation for the little life growing inside her. In November, during a cold snap that frosted the windows and made the prairie sparkle, Rosalie went into labor. Vincent rode into town to fetch the midwife, Mrs. Chen, an experienced woman who had delivered half the babies in Ardmore. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. Vincent paced downstairs, worried sick, while Mrs. Chen and Margaret attended to Rosalie. Finally, as the sun was setting on the second day, the sound of a baby's cry filled the house. Vincent took the stairs 2 at a time and burst into the bedroom to find Rosalie exhausted but smiling, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a soft blanket. "It is a boy," she said softly. "We have a son, Vincent." He approached slowly, almost reverently, and looked down at the tiny face of his child. The baby had dark hair like his mother and was staring up at them with unfocused eyes. "He is perfect," Vincent whispered, touching one tiny hand with his finger. The baby's fingers curled around his, and Vincent felt his heart swell with a love so fierce it took his breath away. They named him Robert Daniel O'Malley, after both their fathers, and called him Bobby. He was a healthy, hungry baby who filled their lives with joy and chaos in equal measure. Rosalie found motherhood both harder and more rewarding than she had expected. The sleepless nights were exhausting, and she worried constantly about whether she was doing everything right. But seeing Bobby's first smile, feeling his tiny hand grip her finger, watching Vincent cradle their son with such tender care made every difficult moment worth it. Vincent was a devoted father, getting up in the night to help with feedings, changing diapers without complaint, singing to Bobby in his deep voice until the baby fell asleep. Rosalie fell in love with him all over again, watching him with their son. As Bobby grew from an infant into a chubby, active toddler, life on the ranch continued to evolve. The cattle operation expanded, and Vincent began to establish a reputation for raising quality stock. Ranchers from across Oklahoma and even neighboring states began to seek out O'Malley cattle for their herds. The mercantile also grew, and in 1886, Rosalie opened a second location in a nearby town. It was a risk, but one that paid off handsomely. With 2 stores generating income and the ranch producing steady profits, the O'Malleys became one of the more prosperous families in the region. But they never forgot where they had come from. Vincent still worked alongside his ranch hands, getting dirty and sweaty in the Oklahoma heat. Rosalie still worked at the mercantile several days a week, personally helping customers and keeping track of inventory. They were determined to stay grounded, to remember that their success came from hard work and determination, not from putting on airs. In 1887, Rosalie became pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier than the first, and in early 1888, she gave birth to a daughter they named Sarah Rose, after Vincent's mother and Rosalie's mother. Sarah was a delicate, beautiful baby with her father's gray eyes and a sunny disposition that charmed everyone who met her. Bobby, now 3 years old, was fascinated by his baby sister and insisted on helping with everything, from bringing diapers to singing to her. Watching her children together filled Rosalie with a contentment she had never known was possible. The years passed in a blur of activity and growth. Bobby started school in Ardmore, riding into town with his mother several days a week. Sarah grew into a bright, curious little girl who loved helping in the garden and collecting eggs from the chickens. Vincent continued to expand the ranch, adding more land when parcels became available and improving the quality of his herd. In 1890, Thomas Bradford, the banker who had tried to force Rosalie to sell her mercantile, left Ardmore in disgrace after it was discovered he had been embezzling from the bank. His departure was a vindication for Rosalie, proof that her determination to hold onto her father's legacy had been the right choice. That same year, the railroad expanded its operations in Ardmore, bringing new opportunities for commerce. Vincent began shipping cattle by rail to markets in Kansas City and Chicago, commanding premium prices for his well-bred stock. The ranch that had started as 3,000 acres of empty prairie was now a thriving operation with over 5,000 acres and a reputation that extended across the region. Rosalie's mercantile empire also grew, with a third store opening in 1891. She hired managers she trusted to run the day-to-day operations, allowing her to focus on the strategic direction of the business while still spending time with her growing family. In 1892, Rosalie discovered she was pregnant for a third time. At 32, she was older than she had been with her previous pregnancies, and the pregnancy proved challenging. She was often tired and had to reduce her activities significantly. Vincent was worried about her, insisting she rest and take care of herself. Bobby, now 7, and Sarah, now 4, tried to be helpful, bringing their mother pillows and books, sitting with her on the porch in the evenings. In late winter of 1893, during a brutal snowstorm that blanketed the prairie in white, Rosalie went into labor early. The midwife could not get through the snow, and Vincent was forced to deliver the baby himself with help from their housekeeper. It was terrifying, but Vincent remained calm, talking Rosalie through each contraction, supporting her as she labored. And when the baby finally came, a tiny, squalling girl with a shock of dark hair, Rosalie wept with relief and joy. They named her Margaret Catherine, after Rosalie's dear friend and the woman who had helped them build their ranch. Little Maggie was small but healthy, and she quickly became the darling of the family. With 3 children, the house that had seemed so spacious now felt full and alive with noise and activity. Bobby was protective of his sisters, especially little Maggie. Sarah appointed herself as Maggie's teacher, constantly showing her baby sister the wonders of their ranch. Vincent and Rosalie would sometimes sit on the porch in the evenings, after the children were in bed, and marvel at the life they had built together. "You remember when we first met?" Rosalie asked one night, tucked under Vincent's arm as they watched the stars. "I remember thinking you were the most beautiful woman I had ever seen," Vincent said, "and the most stubborn." Rosalie laughed. "You looked like a saddle tramp who did not have a penny to his name." "I know," Vincent said ruefully. "I must have seemed like a terrible prospect." "But you were not," Rosalie said seriously, turning to look at him. "Even before I knew about the land, I saw who you really were. A good man, an honest man, someone I could trust with my heart." "And I saw a woman of strength and courage," Vincent said. "Someone who would not give up, no matter how hard things got. I knew you were the one I wanted to build a life with." They kissed, a sweet, familiar kiss that still made Rosalie's heart flutter after all these years. As the 1890s continued, the O'Malley family became pillars of the Ardmore community. Vincent served on the town council, helping to guide the growing town's development. Rosalie donated generously to the new church and school, remembering her own struggles and wanting to help others who faced hard times. Bobby grew into a serious, intelligent boy who loved books and learning. At 12, he announced he wanted to be a lawyer, and Vincent and Rosalie supported his ambition, making plans to send him to college when the time came. Sarah, at 8, was a natural horsewoman who loved the ranch life. She could often be found helping the ranch hands or riding the range with her father. Vincent delighted in teaching her everything he knew about ranching, and Rosalie saw that their daughter might be the one to carry on the ranch legacy. Maggie, at 3, was the baby of the family and reveled in the attention. She was bright and cheerful, with a laugh that could light up any room. She loved helping her mother in the kitchen and playing with the barn cats. In 1896, the O'Malley Ranch celebrated its 15th anniversary. Vincent and Rosalie threw a party, inviting everyone who had been part of their journey. The celebration lasted all day, with food and music and dancing under the Oklahoma sky. As the sun set and the guests began to leave, Vincent pulled Rosalie into a dance, swaying to the music of the fiddle and guitar. 15 years, he said softly. The best 15 years of my life. Mine too, Rosalie said, resting her head against his chest. I love you, Vincent O'Malley. I love you too, Rosalie. More than anything in this world. They danced until the music stopped, surrounded by their children, their friends, and the land they had built their dreams upon. The turn of the century brought new challenges and opportunities. Bobby left for college in the fall of 1900, heading to a university back east to study law. It was hard for Rosalie to let him go, her firstborn child venturing out into the world, but she was proud of the young man he had become. Sarah, at 16, was increasingly involved in running the ranch. She had a natural talent for animal husbandry and was experimenting with new breeding techniques she had read about in agricultural journals. Vincent was immensely proud of her and began to talk seriously about making her a partner in the ranch operations. Maggie, at 10, was still in school but showing a strong interest in business. She would spend hours at the mercantile with her mother, learning about inventory management and customer relations. Rosalie saw echoes of herself in her youngest daughter, and wondered if Maggie might take over the mercantile empire one day. Vincent, now 43, was still vigorous and active, though Rosalie noticed he moved a little slower after long days in the saddle. She herself, at 40, felt the years in her joints on cold mornings, but she was still healthy and active, still involved in all aspects of their various enterprises. They had built something lasting, something that would outlive them and provide for generations to come. The broke saddle tramp and the struggling mercantile owner had created an empire through hard work, determination, and most importantly, love. In 1902, Bobby returned from college with his law degree and a fiancée, a sweet, intelligent young woman named Elizabeth from Philadelphia. The wedding was held at the ranch, a grand affair that drew people from across the state. Rosalie cried as she watched her son marry, remembering the tiny baby he had been and marveling at the man he had become. Bobby and Elizabeth settled in Ardmore, where Bobby opened a law practice. He quickly gained a reputation for honesty and competence, and Rosalie and Vincent were proud to see him carrying on the family tradition of integrity and hard work. Sarah, at 18, announced that she had no interest in marriage yet. She wanted to focus on the ranch, on implementing her ideas for improving the herd. Vincent formally made her a partner, and together They worked to make the O'Malley Ranch one of the premier cattle operations in Oklahoma. Maggie, now 12, continued to divide her time between school and the mercantile. She had inherited her mother's head for business and was already making suggestions for improvements that Rosalie found surprisingly insightful. In 1903, Bobby and Elizabeth presented Rosalie and Vincent with their first grandchild, a boy they named Vincent Robert, after both his grandfathers. Holding her grandson for the first time, Rosalie felt the circle of life complete itself in a beautiful way. The years continued to pass, each one bringing its own joys and challenges. Sarah eventually did marry, at 25, choosing a quiet, steady rancher named William Hart. They lived on a portion of the O'Malley land, continuing to work closely with Vincent and Sarah to manage the growing operation. Maggie took over management of the mercantile businesses when she was 22, showing a talent for expansion and innovation that rivaled her mother's. Under her leadership, the O'Malley mercantile empire grew to include stores across Oklahoma and into neighboring states. Vincent and Rosalie, now in their 50s, began to step back from the day-to-day operations of their businesses, trusting their capable children to carry on what they had started. But they remained active and involved, offering guidance when asked and enjoying the fruits of their decades of labor. On their 25th wedding anniversary in 1908, their children threw them a surprise party at the ranch. Friends and family came from far and wide to celebrate the couple who had become legends in Ardmore. Stories were told of the early days, of Rosalie's struggle to keep the mercantile and Vincent's deception about the land he owned. "Tell us again how you fell in love," Maggie's daughter, now 10, begged. The children always loved hearing the story. Rosalie looked at Vincent, her eyes soft with memory and love. "Well," she said, "it all started when a dusty cowboy walked into my mercantile, looking like he did not have 2 coins to rub together. But he had 3,000 acres, Vincent added with a smile, pulling out the old deed, now framed and hanging on their wall. Though I did not tell her that right away. "Why not, Grandpa?" one of the children asked. "Because I needed to know she would love me for who I was, not what I owned," Vincent explained. And she did. Even when she thought I was just a broke saddle tramp, she saw something in me worth loving. And I saw a woman of such strength and courage that I knew I wanted to spend the rest of my life with her," Rosalie said, reaching for Vincent's hand. "We built all of this together through hard work and determination, but most of all through love." The party continued late into the night, with music and dancing and laughter. As Rosalie and Vincent watched their children and grandchildren celebrating around them, they felt a deep sense of gratitude for the life they had built. They had started with almost nothing, just a struggling mercantile and 3,000 acres of prairie. But through partnership and love, they had created an empire that would provide for their family for generations to come. As the guests began to leave and the children drifted off to bed, Vincent and Rosalie found themselves alone on the porch of the house they had built together. The Oklahoma night was clear and cool, the stars bright overhead. 25 years, Rosalie said softly. "Sometimes it seems like yesterday, and sometimes it feels like we have always been together." "I cannot imagine my life without you," Vincent said, pulling her close. "You are my partner, my love, my everything." "And you are mine," Rosalie said. "I was so wrong about you when we first met. I thought you were just a drifter, someone who would pass through my life and be forgotten. And instead, I stayed and put down roots deeper than either of us could have imagined," Vincent said. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the moon rise over their land. The land that had been Vincent's investment in the future had become the foundation for a family legacy. The mercantile that Rosalie had fought so hard to keep had grown into a thriving business empire, and the love that had brought them together had only deepened and strengthened with the passing years. In 1910, Vincent and Rosalie celebrated their 50th birthdays within a month of each other. Their children organized a joint celebration, and people came from across the state to honor the couple who had helped build Ardmore into a prosperous, thriving community. At the celebration, the mayor of Ardmore gave a speech honoring their contributions to the town. Vincent and Rosalie O'Malley represent the best of what the American West can produce, he said. Through hard work, integrity, and determination, they have built not just businesses but a legacy that will endure for generations. They have employed hundreds of people, supported schools and churches, and shown us all what is possible when two people work together toward a common goal. Rosalie felt tears prick her eyes as she listened. She thought back to the terrified young woman she had been, standing in the ruins of her vandalized mercantile, wondering if she would lose everything. She could never have imagined then that she would end up here, surrounded by children and grandchildren, respected and loved by her community. That night, as they prepared for bed in the house that had sheltered their family for nearly 3 decades, Vincent said, "Do you have any regrets, Rosalie? Anything you wish you had done differently?" Rosalie thought for a long moment. "No," she said finally, "not a single regret. Every choice I made, every challenge I faced led me to this moment. Led me to you, to our children, to this life we have built. How could I regret any of that?" "I feel the same," Vincent said. "Even the hard times, the struggles, they were all worth it because we went through them together." As they lay in bed that night, Rosalie thought about the journey they had taken together. From that first day when Vincent had walked into her mercantile, looking like a broke saddle tramp, to this moment, with their family thriving and their legacy secure. It had been a beautiful journey, full of love and partnership and shared dreams. The next decade brought more changes. Bobby's law practice flourished, and he was eventually appointed as a judge. Sarah and William's ranch operation merged completely with the original O'Malley Ranch, creating one of the largest cattle operations in Oklahoma. Maggie's business acumen took the mercantile empire to new heights, and she became one of the most successful businesswomen in the state. Vincent and Rosalie's grandchildren grew and thrived, some showing interest in ranching, others in business or law. The O'Malley name became synonymous with success and integrity throughout Oklahoma. In 1920, Vincent and Rosalie celebrated their 37th wedding anniversary quietly, just the two of them. They had both slowed down considerably, though they were still relatively healthy for people in their 60s. They sat on the porch of their house, the same porch where they had spent countless evenings over the years, watching the sunset over land that still took Rosalie's breath away. "Do you remember," Vincent said, "when I told you I owned 3,000 acres and you looked at me like I had grown a second head?" Rosalie laughed, the sound still as musical as it had been when she was a young woman. "I thought you were lying, or crazy. I could not believe that someone who owned that much land would let people think he was just a drifter. I needed to know who I could trust," Vincent said, "and I found you, the best thing that ever happened to me." "We found each other," Rosalie corrected gently. "And we built something amazing together. Not just the ranch or the businesses, but a family. A life full of love and purpose." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, they sat together in comfortable silence. After 37 years of marriage, they did not always need words. They understood each other on a level that went beyond language, a connection forged through years of partnership and love. In the early morning hours of a cool October day in 1922, Vincent passed away peacefully in his sleep, with Rosalie holding his hand. He was 65 years old, and he had lived a full, rich life. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people, all wanting to pay their respects to a man who had been a pillar of the community. Rosalie stood strong throughout the service, though her heart was breaking. She had lost her partner, her love, her best friend. In the weeks following Vincent's death, Rosalie found herself at loose ends. For nearly 40 years, Vincent had been the center of her world. Every decision she made, every plan she formed had included him. Now she had to learn to navigate life without him. Her children were worried about her, but Rosalie was stronger than they knew. She had faced hardship before and survived. She would survive this too, though the pain of Vincent's loss would never fully heal. She threw herself into work, spending more time at the ranch and the mercantile. She found comfort in the familiar routines, in the businesses they had built together. And she found joy in her grandchildren, who reminded her so much of Vincent with their energy and enthusiasm. On what would have been their 40th wedding anniversary, Rosalie visited Vincent's grave, bringing flowers from the garden she had planted so many years ago. She sat beside his headstone and talked to him, telling him about the ranch, about the children and grandchildren, about all the little details of life he was missing. "I miss you every day," she said softly, "but I know you are still with me, in everything we built together. In our children's eyes, in the land we loved, in the businesses we created. You are everywhere, Vincent, and I carry you in my heart." Rosalie lived for another decade after Vincent's death, remaining active and involved until the very end. She saw great-grandchildren born, saw the family businesses continue to thrive, saw Ardmore grow from a dusty frontier town into a modern city. On a warm spring day in 1932, at the age of 72, Rosalie passed away peacefully, surrounded by her children and grandchildren. Her last words were, "Tell Vincent I am coming home." At her funeral, her children spoke of her strength, her determination, her unwavering love for their father. They told the story of how she had fought to keep her father's mercantile, how she had fallen in love with a man she thought was a broke saddle tramp, how together they had built an empire from nothing but hard work and love. Rosalie was buried beside Vincent on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built together. And if you visited their graves on a clear Oklahoma evening, you could almost feel their presence still there. Two souls who had found each other against all odds and built something that would last forever. The O'Malley legacy continued for generations. The ranch still operated, though it changed and evolved with the times. The mercantile businesses eventually transformed into a modern retail chain, but the name O'Malley still stood for integrity and quality. And the descendants of Vincent and Rosalie told their story to their children, passing down the tale of two people who had started with almost nothing and built an empire through love and partnership. Years later, when Bobby's grandson was researching the family history, he found the original deed to the 3,000 acres, carefully preserved in a glass case. He also found the ledger from Rosalie's mercantile, with an entry from the day Vincent had first walked in and bought supplies. Looking at these artifacts, he understood something profound about his great-grandparents. They had not just built businesses or accumulated wealth. They had created a foundation of love and partnership that had sustained their family through generations. They had shown that with determination, hard work, and most importantly, love, anything was possible. The story of Vincent and Rosalie O'Malley became a legend in Ardmore. The broke saddle tramp who turned out to own 3,000 acres, and the determined young woman who had loved him before she knew about his wealth. It was a love story for the ages, a testament to the power of seeing beyond appearances to the heart of a person. And on clear Oklahoma nights, some people claimed they could still see two figures standing on the porch of the old O'Malley house, watching the sunset over land they had loved, together for all eternity. Whether it was real or just wishful thinking did not matter. What mattered was the legacy they had left behind, a legacy of love that would endure as long as the prairie wind blew across the Oklahoma plains. Their story was one of transformation and growth, of two people who had found each other when they needed it most and built a life that exceeded their wildest dreams. Vincent had walked into Rosalie's mercantile as a stranger, hiding his true circumstances to find someone who would love him for who he was. And Rosalie, struggling to maintain her father's legacy, had found in Vincent not just a partner in business but a partner in life. Together, they had faced down bullies and thieves, had weathered economic hardships and personal challenges, had raised children and built businesses, had loved each other through the good times and the bad. And when their time on earth was done, they left behind not just wealth and property, but something far more valuable. A family united by love, a community enriched by their contributions, and a story that would inspire generations to come. The 3,000 acres that Vincent had owned when he first came to Ardmore had grown to over 10,000 by the time he died, a testament to his skill and vision. The single mercantile that Rosalie had fought so hard to keep had grown into a chain of stores across multiple states, a testament to her business acumen and determination. But more than any material success, they had created a love story that would be remembered long after the land had changed hands and the businesses had evolved into something new. In the end, that was their true legacy, not the acres or the stores or the money, but the love they had shared and the family they had created together. A broke saddle tramp and a struggling mercantile owner had found each other in a dusty Oklahoma town and built something eternal. And that, more than anything else, was a story worth telling, a love worth celebrating, and a legacy worth preserving for all time.